Hello and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk and ELT. Just me today, and topic of conversation is going to be about something related to the school, but just kind of teaching in general. So I don't even know where to categorize this. One of the things that's been happening lately, I mean, lately I'm talking about past 5 years. So my perception of time is shot at this point. But one of the things that's been happening is that, just silencing my phone quickly, is that students are coming to schools, private teachers, etc., and they are requesting that they have personalized courses. This is like the new thing, the new jargon, personalized courses. Okay, which is fine, to be honest. It's great for teachers because especially those who are in institutions and private teaching where you have the autonomy to be able to modify your classes, the syllabus, materials, etc. But one of the things that is kind of coming out of that is, people are just messing it up. So then it makes it harder for the rest of us who are trying to do a good job. But let's talk about it. So most of the students that come into, at this point, I think I've seen hundreds of students, honestly, hundreds of students have come in and out of the school, privately, previous endeavors at other schools and things like that. And so the students are just sick of franchises. Now, I'm not trying to shit on franchises because honestly, most of the English teachers who were born in non-English speaking countries had to go to franchise because that was kind of the way that it went. I'm talking like 20 years ago. So most of the teachers now actually learned in franchises. and then we're now trying to demonize these franchises, which we can't really do. They're dinosaurs. In a sense that they tend to cling to some old practices, we can put it that way. But the only reason that they cling to that is because they're so massive. Because if they decide to change and say, okay, we're going to be super innovative, we're going to change the game, we're going to, completely revolutionize and follow newest trends and things like that, first of all, it's too expensive. The return on investment for them, the cost benefit is not even close. And second, it's such a huge thing, like a big undertaking. I'm thinking about here in Brazil. We have a couple franchises. I'm not going to name them, but everybody knows them, the famous ones, right? And imagine them. They're all across Brazil, all the major cities, even tiny little cities in the countryside that have little branches here and there. Imagine them trying to change all of their material for teens, for example. It would be just ridiculous. And so they don't have the flexibility that some other schools, institutions, and private teachers have. So first, I understand the frustration from students that they don't want to have those traditional courses anymore because they feel as if it hasn't given them any benefits. They haven't had any results. I will say though, usually the students that get fed up with the franchise schools, when they come to us, they usually have a decent vocabulary. I'm talking in general. Some of them have a terrible vocabulary, but a decent vocabulary. And they have some sort of understanding of some grammar. And they can do some things when it comes to skills, receptive skills. The problem is that when you have these large scale schools and they focus on trying to standardize courses for everyone across the board, what tends to happen is it turns into this model that the student is the receptacle. We need to just put information in there and then our job is done. We've gotten through 6 modules in 6 months. We've given the students all of the information. What they don't have, because they have to standardize the courses, because as I'm learning with commercial departments, whole separate episode, because pedagogical departments and commercial departments, do not get along. What I'm learning with commercial departments is that they want to sell a product because it's easier. It's easier for them to package something and say, well, this course lasts 6 months, this course lasts 12 months, here's the price, and just throw it into the school. And that's not really how things work. But if you're a huge, massive scale like those franchises are, then that's kind of how it has to go. It does work for some people, those people who are very dedicated, who can do self-study, who are motivated to interact and engage with English outside of the classroom. But that's not the average student. That's the exception to the students. The average students are not doing those types of things. They're not consistently doing homework. They're not consistently every day saying, I'm going to study something. They don't have a study schedule. That's not the average student. So the average student that comes from a franchise is frustrated because the franchises don't have the flexibility. It doesn't make financial sense for them to work with more personalized courses, if that makes sense. So let's talk about private teachers. So private teachers, it's really interesting to personalize your courses because whether it's through techniques, whether it's through materials, whether it's through content that's included, the delivery methods, feedback, student support, the modality in which you're delivering the course, whether it's online, if it's hybrid, if it's, it's a mix of everything. However you want to personalize it, that you think, aligns with your teaching beliefs and that's going to work for people, cool. That's great. The problem that institutions have is they're too bulky. So, when I started at GT, I actually started as a consultant, not as the coordinator. And when I started at GT, I started with a project. And the project was materials. They were struggling a little bit with materials. They were struggling a little bit with standardizing, making sure that every student has the same level of quality and that every student is receiving not a standardized course, but every student's receiving the same level of treatment. If the interaction is proper, then they're progressing the same way. Because once you start getting to 15, 20, 25 teachers, it's hard. Everybody has their own personality, and we're well aware of that. And so it was, how do we standardize this enough that we know people are getting quality education? But how can we leave it just lenient enough that teachers have autonomy to personalize the course? And so this was the struggle. And I'm going to give you some tips, especially for those small school owners, private teachers who are maybe thinking about expanding, and even private teachers. Hopefully they're helpful for you. But how I looked at it was, well, I have to have some sort of skeleton, some sort of framework that abides to kind of, let's put it in quotation marks, international rules, right? So I want our students, when they leave here, they fit into wherever they decide to go. If they decide to stay in Brazil, some of our students, we have students in, right now, primarily Brazil, the US, and Western Europe. I want those people, no matter where they land, no matter where they go, they'll be fine. They'll just kind of fit into some school if they decide to study with us. If they go to a different country and they want to do a more immersive thing because they're in a physical place where they can go to a school and interact with it, that's fine. But I wanted to have them fit into some sort of international standards because I think that's important. It's not what GT thinks. It's not what I think. Kelly, who am I? Who am I in this game of ELT? You know what I mean? And so we tried to remove the ego out of, and the identity out of where we place students. We wanted it to be very internationally based and focused on, okay, so if they go anywhere, people will be able to identify where they fit in. on a language level. I'm talking proficiency. I'm not talking about anything else than language proficiency here. Then once I kind of structured that, then I decided, all right, we'll use this scale, CEFR, which is the easiest way to do that. We'll use this scale because it's internationally recognized. It's the easiest thing that people can identify. And then within that scale, I had to research and look through what are the priorities? Like, what do students at these levels need what do they look like? Not in terms of what's the grammar list. No. What do they look like? Like, what can they do? What can they produce? What should they be exposed to? Because there's certain things that they should be able to interact with materials, people, just the language in general should be able to interact with at this level. And what does that look like? And so then we set up criteria. So everyone that comes into the school, we decided, okay, so this person falls into this category and this category has this criteria. But we know that when students come in, they have their list of priorities, which does not always align with the list or the syllabus that course books have, for example, or, private schools have in terms of. So I needed to make a flexible enough system that my teachers, because they're trained and they know what they're doing, and I trust them, which is the beauty of having a good team, my teachers could go and say, after the needs analysis, when I give them the report, say, hey, this is the profile of the student, this is what they're looking for, this is what their top priorities are, immediate needs X, Y, and Z, and then we have midterm and long-term goals, here's this, blah, blah, blah. When I give them that report, they'll be able to look and say, okay, let me develop their syllabus, their course, their journey, however you want it, their curriculum, and let me put it in the order. But I didn't want it to be something where it's like, okay, so we puzzle piece these things together and then that's it, it's fixed. Because what if something changes? Right? So then, I took time to do this because I really do take pride in my work. I know that sometimes I cuss and I put random things out there and I joke all the time. I'm constantly laughing. It looks as if I don't take anything seriously sometimes, but I really do take my job seriously. And so I said, okay, it needs to be customizable where we can dictate the order and sequence in which students are going to go through their course depending on what they have for immediate needs, etc., what they want, and the things that they're interested in, content that would be engaging for them. However, I also need to make it flexible enough that if something happens in the student's life, we can change priorities and we can, I never watched Friends, but it's super famous, the pivot. We can pivot very easily where it doesn't affect the student. They don't even notice in terms of, okay, so I got a new job and now this is what I'm doing. It's like, whoop, okay, so let's kind of reassess what's going on here. Are the priorities still the same? They're not the same. Let's reorder them and then we can change. We can move things around. So I needed to, and I wrote an article about this. I needed to make I felt like I was Dr. Frankenstein. I felt as if I was creating this monster because in terms of customization, we've got lessons, right? And what in my experience, and may not be the experience of everybody, but in my experience, students are really not hyper concerned with, sorry. So I'm so distracted sometimes, sorry. Hyper concerned with the actual material. If the material looks professional, whether it comes from a course book, whether it comes from those sites like ESL Brains, Lingua House, even we've got a duo here of ladies that makes the courses. They've got We Help You Teacher, something I forget their name. Sorry, I might have said it wrong. And then there's a bunch of other people. There's some charlatans that don't know what they're doing. At least the Lingua House, ESL Brains, they're like decent, you know, they've got the We Help You Teacher ladies, they've got some teaching credentials. They probably know what it's like to be in a classroom. There's other peoples that claim they're teachers and they have zero credentials and they're selling like whole books and it's like, oh, I have the solution for everything. Oh, by the way, I've seen some of those books, like the apostila things. Horrible. Trash. Anyways, going back. So students actually really don't care as long as it looks professional. They don't feel like, oh, you know, what is this hack job doing? No, they're okay with it. The students really, their focus is this content engaging? Because they're language learners, they're not language teachers. So they don't really know how to assess whether something's effective or not effective in the classroom. That's your job. Separate podcast, I can talk about that too. Anyways, and the materials are fine. As long as the materials look professional, it's fine. Students are engaged with it and they're moving forward. What they do like in terms of personalization, what I've noticed is that students say they want a personalized course. The course materials can actually be relatively generic. I'm going to put the exception of, because there's always exceptions, ESP and business English people, because sometimes you can use general materials with them, but if they have a very specific task that they need to do, then you can't really use generalized materials. For example, I have an executive, he's the president of a large pharmaceutical company, and he has to give presentations to Japanese investors and things like that. Okay, fine. So that, I can't use generalized materials. I literally take his presentation. I'm like, send it to me, take out all the sensitive information if you need to. Send it to me, and then I will build series off of that. You'll deliver it. We'll do a class. I'll do some language. We can like play around with it. So that, then no, yeah, you can't really use generalized materials. For everyone else who just has a general goal, like, oh, I need to be able to speak better. I'm interested in traveling. I need better English to express my opinions and my thoughts or describe processes because, you know, I use it in work. Honestly, if they don't have to do like, I have to do this tomorrow, then you can probably use more generalized materials and you can just adapt them. Or you can change the context in them, or you can you can put like their company logo there, and then instead of doing it about a case study company, they do it about their company. You can adapt them. But the generalized materials are actually fine. What students, in my humble opinion, what students actually mean by personalizing is they want personalized interaction. They want to be treated as if they are the only thing that's happening in the class, which is fine because they're paying for the services. So sure, why not? So using those materials, whether you use a course book and you put it in a different order, whether you use the materials that like the sites and stuff where you download the materials, which is nothing more than a deconstructed course book, by the way. So anybody who's like, oh no, but I made something, you didn't. Like it's just a deconstructed course book. Course books have a set sequence with the set lessons, and then there's the deconstructed course books, which are now being sold as, you know, programs or independent lessons. I'm not saying anything about the quality of them. I'm just saying, like, one, it's like the students see it as like, oh, I have to follow this sequence because that's typically what people do. They say like, okay, I have to follow it 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to follow the sequence. And then you can deconstruct it where you can put it into a sequence all of your own. And then there's things that authentic materials and things like that where you can create it. But honestly, most of the time, what I've seen is that students don't really need to see them or their personal information in materials. What they need to see is some sort of relation, and the delivery of the materials is customized. So let me go back to the franchise point. So the franchises They use books or they use their apostilas or they have online programs and then they go through it. The reason that people feel frustrated with it is because it's like a cookie cutter way of delivering lessons, a cookie cutter way of delivering English. And there's no way for them to adjust the dynamic. And this, I think, is what students are actually wanting. It's not that the materials are bad. It's not that, because usually students, because I've asked students, hundreds of students, and the materials, were they good? Were they professional? Were they helpful? Were they a good reference tool? Yes, 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 yes. So what didn't you like? I just wasn't seeing progress. What type of dynamic are you looking for? And then they've got lots of opinions. So it seems as if people actually just want to have personalized dynamics and interactions in the class. Meaning they interact with the material, they do what they need to do with that, so they get some sort of language, but then they want to personalize it more. They want to speak more. Because if you have a set time, like some of these institutions do, all you need to do, 6 modules in 6 months, then you can't really slow down the pace as much as you might need to, and you can't remove some of the content to focus on interaction and production. Most students are lacking production practice. They get to points in CEFR where, on the whole, they have a decent linguistic repertoire. They're okay, grammatically speaking, vocabulary, at all the different levels. I'm not saying like, oh, people are fine, they don't need to learn. No, at their level, they have a decent repertoire there that they can express themselves. But what they're really lacking and what they really want is the customized and personalized interaction. So if I were to give advice for anyone, private teachers, small institutions that still have control over what happens in their curriculum, I would say that you need to develop a system in which, first, have teachers that you can trust, that are going to be independent and they're going to be able to handle anything in the classroom that kind of pops up, and they're going to be able to react in an effective manner, meaning they're going to get the students to have progress, whatever pops up. 2, create a system that is really flexible and able to adapt as the students go through. And 3, the materials are not the core part of the course. The interaction is. And so I'm not saying buy bad materials. You have to vet the materials and make sure that they're pedagogically sound and that everything's okay and that they make sense and that they follow like a logical sequence or whatever materials you decide to use. Course books, deconstructed course books, these free lesson things, floating lessons. But if you want to use your own, develop your own materials, if you want to use authentic materials, if you want to use a mix of all of those options, whatever you want to do, fine. But just make sure that that is not like, because the book says, because the lesson said. No, you have to understand that students are more focused on personalizing and customizing the interaction that they have in classes rather than having all of these expensive materials. So I think that for me, at least, it was just kind of like this revelation, like, oh, well, the school doesn't have to break the bank buying materials. I, as a private teacher, don't have to have huge, like investments here. No, I need to have a decent quality set of materials that more or less will help anyone at any level. Knowing that, of course, I'm going to have to adapt. I'm going to have to update things. I'm going to have to include other stuff. Oh, somebody must be here because the alarm has sounded. Anyways, okay, you're going to have to do that because that happens anyways. You should be adapting your materials and you should be adapting your interaction with every class because every student is a little bit different. But that you don't have to break the bank buying ridiculous materials, amounts of materials. You need to have good materials. More importantly, you need to have really good professionals that are dealing with students that know how to interact in a really natural and comfortable way, so that students who complained about the franchises, complained about not having progress, feel as if they're having progress because they're actually practicing production. It's not a huge revelation, but I think sometimes we get, so wrapped up in everything else. It's like, oh gosh, I need to find a solution because I need to provide. No, you need to just work on you. I'm sure your materials, the vast majority of people, their materials are fine. Again, accounting for updating and doing all that stuff. I'm sure your materials are fine. What you need to work on is how you're delivering things and the interaction that you have with the students in class. I think that's it. And as for the franchises, listen, we can demonize them all we want. However, many language teachers went through the franchise process. So it wasn't so terrible. Does it have its flaws? Absolutely. Absolutely. But everything has its flaws. So that's not like, oh my God, revelation. No, everything has its flaws. We can't demonize it too much, because I would much rather someone go through a franchise school that at least has some sort of structure and at least has some people kind of monitoring than those ridiculous people online who think they're teachers who are bullshit artists. And if we demonize franchise schools too much, people who don't maybe don't have the financial conditions to pay for private classes or to pay for more personalized and specialized courses are going to discount them. And for people who need to have that more economical option, it's not a bad option, because at least they're starting, at least they're doing something. And who knows, they might be those types of people that are really dedicated and study outside and have exposure outside. So the franchises actually work well for them because they might be that exception that does surprisingly well. At the end of the day, are franchises great? No. Not saying that. But are they a viable option for many? Are they a financially responsible option for many to start learning English, to at least have exposure, to have some sort of structure behind it? Yes. Is it the best option? I don't think so. But I also think that not everybody can afford private classes. Not everybody can afford specialized teachers or specialized courses. So we have to take the good with the bad. And if people come from franchise options, not to like demonize and be like, oh God, this person doesn't know anything. No, they might know something. It's just that now they're looking for a different dynamic in class, because typically franchises see them as like, let me dump information into these people. And private teachers, in my experience, private teachers really want to interact and see this as a human, and we want to communicate and we want to focus on communication. So let's try to tone it down with the anti-franchise rhetoric. I tend to get on that train sometimes too. But it is a viable option for some. But I think that if we focus on trying to create a different dynamic, then people will have their choice in the marketplace. Free markets, it's a great thing. So if that's your style, then go for it. If you prefer more of focusing on production, or if you need to have a mixture of both of those things, awesome. Do you need to start at the franchise because it's more economical, and then you can start paying for a private teacher? Then you can receive all the information and then practice it. Different cycles, different stages of life. It's totally fine. But that's my recommendation for private teachers when it comes to customization and thinking about personalized courses and all of that good stuff. Focus more on what's happening in the classroom than products that you can buy to shove into the classroom. Focus on what's going on. Interaction, dynamics in the classroom. That's all I have for today. I will talk to you all later.